who is your favorite musician that doesn't play your instrument?
Well, I have I've been on this kind of like guitar kind of like journey lately. So there's a lot of guitar players that kind of, been enjoying very much. So let's give a plug to Matteo Mancuso, young guy who is just a wonderful musician, guitarist, very unusual talent. So
amazing, yeah. Oh, I noticed I've been following your kind of guitar journey, and I think it kind of got me thinking. Obviously, you've particularly with the type of music you do. I mean, there must be a real importance to maintaining that kind of student mindset. Is that something you've always tried to kind of keep going, throughout your kind of career?
That's an interesting. I understand why you're asking me that. I mean, yeah, there's an element to my path that does involve a lot of kind of like shedding and constant work and developing. And I guess people like myself that are into like progressive music or music that has, challenges and within the larger musical sphere. I mean, we're in it for what we need to know has to happen, which is, if you're a classical pianist, you need to be practicing all the time because that stuff's not easy. If you're playing in Dream Theater, you need to be really working all the time because there's certain kind of musical goals that you're looking to achieve. So when I approach the guitar as a student, I'm kind of thinking in the same line as what I have been all along. Like when I, went to classical music school, learned the piano, like coming up with exercises and independence of the fingers and, all these things that, most people wouldn't necessarily get involved with.
Yeah, I think there's something really, and I think this is something that a lot of people that kind of particularly in the more progressive music genres, something that I feel a lot of them resonate with is this kind of flow state you can find yourself in with the more technical stuff. I find a thing I feel, so I'm a guitarist, and you can probably see from back there, and I find I really have to try and balance my engagement with the instrument from the technicality sort of aspect, because I find that's when I'm most engaged, is when I'm playing something tricky. But when it comes to writing a piece of music, the trickiest thing isn't always necessarily the thing that you want to write. How do you balance that kind of like, I'm assuming, I guess I'm making the assumption that you end up in that kind of flow state in the same space that I do in the more technical stuff when you're really engaged with it. How do you balance that with
It's interesting, like, with those who kind of know the bigger picture of who I am and what I've done, know that it's got kind of like, it ranges from just like doing things that you could say, oh man, that's like so technical or whatever, or just doing things that are just like so mellow and just like this flowing. So it kind of like depends on my mood and, what I'm trying to achieve. Like on the guitar, like, when I was a kid at Juilliard studying classical music, I mean, my teacher taught me every scale and arpeggio and every key, and you'd play it in thirds and you'd play it in sixths and you'd play it with different accents. And, there's a lot of kind of like root level structural foundation work to be able to have the finger strength and the finger independence to then be able to articulate any kind of a musical passage that I might imagine. That's the goal, whether it be fast or slow. But to get to be able to play slowly, you kind of almost need to know how to play fast as well. And you need to know how to move each finger with its own kind of like brain, if you will. So, yeah. So when I'm playing the guitar, a lot of times I'll fall into something where I'm trying to do something that involves some degree of like skill, but then also sometimes I'll go, okay, well, now it's just a time to flow and just, go more into like a Jeff Beck mode or something and just try to bend and have it be really pretty and just, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like both. And what's really actually important from this train of thought is that, what is technique even like on an instrument? Technique is the ability to be able to articulate a musical idea, no matter what it is. So how you get there, I mean, that's question. I mean, that's however somebody needs to go, whatever road they need to go down to get to that point is what has to happen,
Yeah, I always kind of use the sort of the maths and the engineering analogy, with the maths sort of being sort of the tool, and I guess the engineering being the actual building of the thing, you know. But I think that kind of something I remember I was watching is a while ago. I was watching there's a lot of views on that now on YouTube of the drum auditions that you guys did quite some time ago, and
Sure.
I really enjoyed. I really related to when you were saying about. I can't remember which drummer it says. You said this about where you almost wanted to like laugh when you were sort of watching them, and that I remember just thinking like, oh, I'm not the only person that gets that. Where you can't explain it, but there's that like why would it make you laugh? But there's that kind of primal thing that where maybe the technique goes out the window. You know, not out the window, but like you're not consciously thinking of it. Like, what do you think it is about a certain, you know, any player or any kind of music that puts you in that kind of headspace? And why do you think it is? Why is it laughter, do you think that?
I can't remember which drummer you're talking about.
I honestly can't either, so it's not the best question.
I can only imagine kind of like the headspace of it, which would be where the, you know, where the music is just flowing so smoothly, and the technique is almost like it's without any thought, and it becomes this higher level thing, and it could make you chuckle, you know, like, oh my God, you know, it's just happening, doing incredible things. And so certainly a lot of the people who came to audition for us as drummers were doing incredible things. So yeah, I think it's when you reach that level where it just, you know, just is like automatic, and all that work has been done, you know, all the shedding has been done, and then you get to your instrument and it just flows out like magic.
Yeah.
And then all young musicians think, oh, yeah, you don't need to practice, it'll just happen. Like, and it's like, that's wrong. You know, the magic is because of all the hours that were in the practice room.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird, I sometimes find if I write a piece of music that I'm really excited about, it is that feeling of almost like that giddy feeling. And it's like, I don't know where that comes from, because it doesn't, you know, and again, if you hear a piece of music that makes you want to kind of laugh in that way, it's not funny, you know. It's a weird how it can kind of, you can get this translation of quite a weird sort of emotion from the music in that sense, which I just thought was kind of, yeah, it was an interesting point, and I really related to it. But well, I was kind of you know, doing the usual browse of your sort of background, and I noticed that you have so many sort of endeavors that I've just seen from you know, sort of over the years, and
Yeah.
do you think there's something, because I mean the thing I've written down is that a lot of people would be busy enough just being in Dream Theater. That's my kind of what I've written as my note. What is it that kind of draws you to having these other kind of pursuits? I mean, even just something like learning the guitar as well, you know.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to the fact that my whole life is music, and you know, I grew up playing classical music, and then I discovered the synthesizer. Well, just to recap quickly, so you get a perspective. At 9, I went to Juilliard, and I was in the preparatory division. When I was 19, I left after being there for many years, and you know, thinking I was going to basically be a concert pianist. So. And when I left, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but I discovered the mini Moog. So all of a sudden, I went from the kind of piano mentality to the synthesizer, which was like a different part of your brain or something. And certainly, when I discovered that you could bend pitch on a mini Moog and turn the filter up and like do all these things with the sound after you played the key, it was an awakening. And whatever roads I had been down and enjoyed at that point, all of a sudden, there were more avenues. And that, in my life, that kind of kept happening. Maybe it's being kind of like a creative mind or whatever, and being, you know, excited by technology and possibilities and different kinds of music and different kinds of chords. So as I would discover different kinds of chords, I would investigate them. I'd write a little piece with them, whether it would be a jazz chord or a progressive rock chord, or I'd hear Morton Subotnick or Tangerine Dream or any electronic music. I'd go, I like that. And I would kind of go do a little bit of that. So for me, like fusing everything together, kind of making my own fusion as a composer, that was almost always easy, because that's the way my brain worked. You know, some people some people really struggle to find an individual voice for their musicality. But for me, it's not because I'm like a rocket scientist. It's just because of kind of like the way my brain works. Everything comes in and it mixes together, and it's like, all this kind of like very swirling creativity that I feel. And it comes out in different ways because I like so many different things, and I'm passionate about so many different kinds of things. Like, in the technology world, I love how technology is making it possible for us to just do more advanced creative things. If you're from anywhere from thinking you could put your hand down on like a glass surface, like on an iPad, and do these wonderful expressions and pitch bends and kind of do the kind of stuff that my application GeoShred does. I mean, that's really exciting. And it's technology that brought us there. Technology allowed us to have this more kind of organic interaction with the instruments that we use. There's a new instrument that I'm passionate about as well. Haven't used it on a Dream Theater album yet or any recording yet, but I certainly will. It's made by a company out of France called Expressive E. It's called the Osmos. I don't know if you've seen me playing that a little bit, but that is a total game-changing instrument, and it brings me to yet another space that I need to investigate. And what the Osmos does is something that's called an MPE instrument, MIDI polyphonic expression. It lets you play it's a black and white keyboard, but the keys, first of all, can go side to side when you reach the bottom of them, and the keys recognize how fast or slow you press them down. So you can literally do like a crescendo on a key, almost like as if the key was a volume pedal unto itself, if you program it that way. So it's totally different than any keyboard as far as the level of control. And it's technology that brought us there. But the fact that that exists, which is like a dream come true, means that there's all these new kinds of musical expression that can be made. And for me, they're calling me, they're like, oh my God, I could write a piece for this, for this instrument. And that would, so now here I am. Sometimes I make a piano album. Sometimes I make a wild progressive rock album. Now I'm going to make an Osmos album. I'm not saying I definitely will, but I mean, I could do that. So for me, there's a lot of things to explore for a number of reasons, because musically, even just harmonically, rhythmically, structurally, there's all these things that I find interesting, attractive, that are kind of calling my name. From a technology level, there's all these different kinds of technologies, whether it be AI or a kind of synthesis, granular synthesis, additive synthesis, that I just get turned on by. And I'm like, I want to do that. I want to create a product that does that. I want to, it gives me ideas, and I talk to developers and we develop ideas, and I play different kinds of music. And yeah, it's kind of like that.
Yeah, it's great. I love the mindset of kind of, I think it's so easy to fall into almost option paralysis when the more and more things come up, the more and more new ways you can do things. I sometimes think, I look at you can look at your instrument and just think, well, where do I start? There's so many options, and then when you think of all the new instruments and all the new ways you can kind of manipulate those, talking about these kind of like sort of volume changes that you can make within the instrument. Do you think there's anything to be said for some level of like restriction in your, going, okay, this is just gonna be piano, or, in terms of how you approach the kind of creative space? Do you feel like there might be some benefit to the bare bones kind of stuff?
Well, I do. I feel like whatever project that you're in, I mean, you're kind of setting up a window of possibilities. I guess what I mean by that is, let's say I go into the studio and I'm going to write a song with Dream Theater, right? So I come up with the first couple of chords or whatever, and they happen to be like major chords, and maybe one of them is an inversion or something. Well, right from the get-go, in the very first measure, I might have set up a kind of like beginning to create a window of parameters, because I'm certainly not going to go from 3 like straight ahead major chords to a flat 9 with a 13th, or it's just not, it wouldn't fit. So it's almost like, it's like when you listen to the radio and you're churning the dial and you hear like, okay, this is this style, and I don't like that kind of music, from like the first 2 measures, or at least you think where it's going. Right. And most often you kind of do, unless the music is so esoteric and changing like every second to be something different. but the beauty of it not necessarily changing that much, and the fact that is some kind of a window of limitations, then is that it creates that for you, and you're able to work within a framework. I think a framework is really, really important. So like another example would be if I'm sitting with my mini Moog and I've got my hand on my pitch wheel, and I'm moving the keys and slowly moving the pitch wheel, and the pitch is going. We just set up a whole thing. I mean, so I could just go into this trippy space and have the pitch moving and the filter moving, and this kind of be something that would just more like space the listener out. And that has nothing to do with chords, but I'm in that world then, and I can kind of relate to that world as well, having grown up and played like late night radio stations for, people who wanted to just go on a journey. So, yeah, I think the limitations are really good, and it's also a really good learning tool. Like, I'll say to somebody, okay, you want to learn how to have a little bit of like the Emerson kind of ELP-ish sound. Well, then let's talk about sus chords. Let's play chords in fourths. Let's talk about sus4, sus2. Maybe write a piece with that. And your limitation is those are the chords you're going to use. Mostly use those chords. The limitation and falling within that particular window, it can teach you, right? You kind of have to dive into that world and then do that. And then then putting it all together, well, that's where like progressive music comes, right? So maybe it's not so totally predictable, but it still still has limitations. I would say every like Dream Theater song we ever wrote has limitations. And I'm not doing anything, like I'm not doing the pitch wheel mini Moog space thing in the middle of a Dream Theater song. But I could on something else.
Yeah, it's speaking of, are there any a question I kind of was intrigued to ask was when you obviously there are you guys have been going long enough now that there are bands that are kind of in some ways emulating your kind of sound. I mean, inspiration's a big part of this kind of creative process. Are there any moments where you've heard something and been like, oh, that's us, but like not in a way you'd expect? Like you've heard, oh, that's a Dream Theater thing in some way, but not in a way maybe that you've come across before. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's versions of like Dream Theater-esque things. Like somebody will do something on the piano. It's very like Dream Theater. Like, of course, Dream Theater is not generally solo piano music unless I have a piano solo in the middle of a piece. It's more like I will hear music and go, oh, well, they've been listening to Dream Theater. That's, it's harder to tell if it varies too much. Then you don't know, is it because they listen to us or because they listen to something else? Or maybe a little, what percentage of it? Then it's like, well, they could have listened to some Dream Theater because there's elements of that. One thing that's interesting about being in a band like Dream Theater is one of these bands that's been remarkably influential on so many people. I mean, I know that, but I'm always reminded by that, especially during my guitar journey, because I'll be hitting up, different guitarists and, wanting to get tips or tricks, and all of them, pretty much 98% of them say, oh, I'm a huge Dream Theater fan. John Petrucci's my idol, and it's just, I hear that like every day.
Yeah. Is there anything about maybe the guitarist like mindset that you feel maybe that they could learn from, say, a pianist and vice versa? Is there anything different about how you found that these people have approached the instrument compared to maybe yourself, where you've started in a different place?
Yeah. Well, what I realized in doing the guitar thing is that it's just how different the guitar is from the keyboard. Because with guitar, you can play it in so many different ways. Most guitarists are not thinking about multiple lines moving at the same time. Unless maybe you're a classical guitarist, then you're thinking about like counterpoint and things like that. But like as a pianist, that's been like my whole life. I mean, like when I learned to play classical music, some of the first pieces I played were like Bach inventions, which were like 2-part pieces, which, kind of interacting, and then maybe a fugue, which has more voices moving. So I think that kind of thing is really important for somebody who's playing the guitar to, take a look at, because it opens up yet another avenue of guitar playing. I mean, somebody could survive their whole life playing the guitar and never do that, but it's there. I mean, it's part of, music and the possibilities for composition and for the way you play. So I think it deserves to be, looked at. Or like for me playing the guitar now, one of the things that it's funny because most people don't even do this, but one of the things that almost comes somewhat naturally is to play with two hands on the fretboard, right? And do like that kind of tapping thing, although maybe like not at Stanley Jordan's level, but he was of course the king of that kind of thing. You know Stanley Jordan is.
I've heard the name. I feel like as a guitarist, I almost feel criminal there.
He does he can do like jazzy fusion stuff with two hands on the fretboard tapping.
Yeah,
it's pretty incredible. But there's so many ways to actually learn from the keyboard, from the guitar mindset, because keyboard players do all these other kinds of things that guitarists generally aren't aware of or don't know. So if somebody who's learning to play the guitar, this may be a good and bad thing, because it means that I just make it harder for myself. Okay, now I want to learn a counterpoint thing. So like a friend of mine, Brazilian friend, Matthias Schaefer, wrote me like an original kind of like Bach kind of thing on the guitar that he thought was perfect for me to like learn how to do that. So I'm sitting there going, wow, this is opening up some channels of new possibilities on the guitar, all kinds of things, like that are possible to bring into your awareness. And the other way around too, guitar things that you do and you go, wow, that's interesting. You would never do that on a keyboard, but let me try. Or even I'll do that. All of a sudden I'll be playing a riff. I'll go, what notes am I playing? And then I'll kind of look down and go, and I'll try it and go, wow, I would have never written that on the piano. It's like so weird.
Yeah. You mentioned how you kind of sort of communicating with these guitarists and sort of picking up lessons from them, and I noticed you're very sort of active in sort of on your social media, and obviously all this sort of the way you're interacting with meeting and talking to these guitarists. Is there something about you, this kind of connection with staying connected in the kind of online world? Is that something that you feel really is important to you? Just, I suppose on the whole, but also sort of, especially on something like on tour, for example, when life can get pretty hectic.
Yeah, well, one of the really wonderful things about the whole experience of like doing this guitar journey is all the interactions that I've had. It's like just being able to meet all these people, and like I just love it. It's probably just as good as learning the instrument. Just opening up. I am just. It's one of the things I really care about is, well, other people and finding out what they're about and sharing information, whether it's knowledge or just some kind of tuning that we have personally or, anything like that. I mean, to me, that just makes me so fulfilled feeling when I can connect with somebody. And there's this feeling like, wow, I might have given them some energy and maybe even some help, and they might be showing me a couple of riffs. And, it generally works out so beautifully. And one of the things, I'm really, blessed, lucky that a lot of these guys I talk to, even if I didn't know them before, are familiar with my music. So there's generally there's some reason that they might be excited to talk to me, as well as my being excited that I want to talk to them because they have information that I might want to know. So it creates a very cool and good feeling kind of interaction. And that's been the story for the last couple of years, because I always reach out to people and, say, hey, let's hang out, let's connect. I'd love to, just meet you and just see what, just chat. Yeah. Bring your guitar.
Is that,
it's cool, man.
Do you think that connection, so when it comes to that desire right from the beginning to kind of play music, do you think that comes from somewhere that is more internal, or is that connection, that kind of external aspect, that sort of communicative thing? How much do you feel like music is sort of, driven by an intrinsic feeling of just enjoying it versus the kind of communicative, sharing that experience with someone else?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I mean, the way I feel about it is that I use music as a way to tune myself, firstly. Like if I approach the piano or the synthesizer and I can feel like connected to the instrument and allow the music to kind of flow through me. Has to do with things like, if my hands are warm, if I'm in a good headspace. But if I can go there and I can just play and kind of achieve something where I just literally feel that things are so smooth and the ideas I have in my head are just coming out without any dissonance or interruption, then it's personally healing. And I'm in probably one of the best kind of headspaces that I could be in while being on this planet. It would be like being with a really, really good friend. I guess it would be similar to being like with a really good friend and feeling like I am so comfortable with this person and the interaction is just so meaningful. And this is a real warmth of spirit between you. For me, music is a way to tune myself. So, and that, and the more I work on it through my life, the more I'm looking for that, and the more I can achieve it. And so that's number one for me. And then now that I feel like I've gotten pretty good at getting to that headspace, if I can then share it with other people, if I can even put my phone down, like on my piano and turn on Instagram Live or, and then achieve that headspace while other people are watching, which is another level of challenge because all of a sudden, it's like you've got people looking at you, and how do you maintain this kind of personal space without letting interference and distortion and whatever ego come into play? And for me, that's the next level of challenge. And it's certainly something that I'm also working on, and something that if I can achieve that, if I can be in my headspace, that where I'm feeling like, okay, I am in tune with the universe, my fingers feel right, I'm flowing, the ideas are going, and there's people watching, then it's a higher level, because then you're using music as like an external communication tool. So I can play, and maybe you're listening, and all of a sudden you're getting into like a headspace that relates to what I'm projecting. And because I've tuned myself, I can maybe tune the room, whether it be physical or whether it be through the magic of the internet. That's fantastic. If 1,000 people come onto my live stream, and all of a sudden I'm in this great headspace, and everybody's like, wow, I love this. I love listening to this. It's just making me feel so peaceful, or this made my day, or, he's not playing too well today, or that's not good. But no, but look, I'm, definitely looking for that. I love the sharing thing is the next level. If I can do that, fantastic. And I look for that opportunity to practice getting to that point, because when it happens, it's really cool. It doesn't happen all the time, but it sometimes happens.
Yeah. I really like that kind of phrase, tuning yourself. I mean, for not just because of the sort of the musical thing, but that idea of like centering yourself, is quite it's so difficult, I find, to do nowadays. With so many things pulling you left and right, little distractions, little things. It's
well, totally, man. But that's also the reason that I've been enjoying the guitar, because when I sit and I practice my guitar, no matter what I'm doing, if it's scales or I'm working on an exercise or just practicing, just playing something, I feel very peaceful. It's like this focus. It's like, okay, I'm here now and I'm focusing on this, and everything else is kind of like on the outside, and it's almost creating a little like bubble around myself because I'm working on something, and I'm, even if I'm screwing it up and I can't do it, it's still a very personal, very directed kind of mental approach towards a goal. And I find that really relaxing, and, in some ways, a way to tune myself up as well.
That sort of presence of mind with the instrument is, I think, it's that extra little bit more tricky. I know you mentioned the ego and kind of when that can come in, especially if people are watching you. And I feel like there's a certain level of squashing the ego that you almost have to achieve to get to that kind of presence of mind in the moment, especially if you're playing live.
It's hard, but it's a life's journey. A lot of times I'll work with people, whether they're patrons or whether they're just other musicians, and asking me, for maybe a little bit of my, perspective of what they're doing. And one of the things I say to people a lot is, hey, like, before you play a note on your instrument, just imagine what you want it to sound like. And when you play it, did you achieve what you imagined? And always be, you have to learn to be as much of a listener as kind of like the activator. So, you see too many players that are just doing their thing. They're moving their fingers on the instrument, but you feel like they're almost ahead of themselves, and they're not really listening if they're making a nice sound or not. Just trying to play the right notes. They're trying so hard or whatever. Meanwhile, maybe if they slowed down and they made a really nice sound on all the notes, everybody would be happier. It's that kind of thing where you have to be able to slow down the process and breathe a little bit and listen to the sound you're making on an instrument. And then I think that's when you start becoming more, a higher level player and can get into the headspace that we all desire as musicians.
I mean, like communicating that kind of authentic sound where you're not running ahead and where you're actually a part of it as you're doing it, which obviously it sounds like the obvious goal, but actually I think a lot of people, I'm so guilty of it, especially when it comes to writing riffs and stuff.
It's hard because you're working, maybe something is really challenging to do, to go from this position, then you got to go here, then you got to move here, and unless you practice so much, you're going to be worried, and that worry might overtake the flow of being able to do that and make sure you get a good sound, listen to it. And that's why you got musicians who sit around practicing all day. So you got like a Mateus Asado, who's like a beautiful guitar player who just somehow there's magic there. He just plays and it just flows, and you think, wow, how does that happen? Well, it happens because the guy, he spent so many hours for so many years with his guitar, and everything else in his life was put, he can talk to you about it himself, but everything else was put, to the side, and he focused on the guitar and got this relationship where things did come easier from experience and practice and time.
Yeah, it's a super important thing. I think being able to communicate how you communicate in some way what you're thinking about. Do you think that's something that you've kind of, obviously, you talked about the more sort of concert pianist route, for example, where perhaps you're more communicating, and you might be communicating another person's idea, or if you're a session player, maybe, for example. Why do you think that element of real-time sort of musical communication, if you like, for want of a better phrase, is something that drew you more towards the creative side of things than the pure sort of playing someone else's music, or something like that, or any other sort of musical pursuit?
I'm not sure I totally asked me that question.
So that sort of, I think I put my foot in my mouth phrasing that. So the expressive side of things, I guess in simpler terms, and that's my fault, not yours, certainly. The sort of expressive side of things. What is it that drew you to that over, say, session work, or playing someone else's music? What is it that drew you to creating music?
My own expression or something, right? Being a composer in a group that writes our own music and all that kind of good stuff. Yeah, because I think what drew me to that is that because I was always like a sponge for all these styles and interested in trying them and incorporating them, all of a sudden I have this voice that I want to share, like not everybody has that. Not everybody's a composer. Not everybody's an improviser. And for those people who love music and can figure out how to play beautifully, maybe there's another task at hand, like being a session player, or, being a classical musician that plays out of, from a printed page or whatever. But for me, I needed to be able to, really do something. I kind of crave being able to put out things that are original, to share my own particular soup of stylistic influences.
Yeah. I've found since trying to be sort of more creative with writing stuff, I've found a greater appreciation for other kind of forms of art as well. Like I find, like, as in actual like paintings, like actual visual art.
Yeah.
I found you noticing little things, little imperfections a lot more. I don't know if that's something you can relate to particularly, but
that's cool. Yeah. Like for me, the visual world is also really important. One of the things I do is I'm an ambassador for a really, really awesome company out of Israel called Light Tricks. And they're in the, kind of like video photo world, and they're working with AI. And there's some of the things that I've been posting these days kind of features their latest AI developments. You've probably seen some of the wacky stuff, like all of a sudden I'm playing and it turns into some like a stone man or something like that. And it's like, what? This is my journey with Light Tricks. And to me, that in some ways is as enjoyable as all the musical stuff I do. I don't know, also because like the visual and there's something about the visual that I find very connected with the audio. It's not that I have like, was it synesthesia or something like that, but maybe in a way I kind of have something that's related to that. Going all the way back to my first iOS app that I put out, which was called MorphWiz, which was an application for the iOS products that you would play notes on vertical lines, and every note could kind of go in its own direction. But every note also, every place you touched on a vertical line, which was a note, was a waveform. But every waveform had a visual icon that was assigned to it. So as you went like this with your hands, the visuals would change in real time and show you the graphic that I thought lined up with the sound.
That's so cool.
Yeah. That's and actually cool. What's interesting about our conversation today is that very, very soon, this happened almost 15 years ago when when the App Store first opened up, and that was called MorphWiz. And very soon I'm going to release MorphWiz 2. Right. I'm ready. We're ready to pretty much press the button. We're just working on some marketing materials. When I released the first MorphWiz, it was an application that it did morphing. It did visual and sonic morphing, but the sonic morphing was more like cross fading. But now, 2023, the sonic morphing is actually algorithms that allow the sound to literally morph from one to another. So you can have 4 different source sounds, like your voice, a string sound, a trumpet, a violin, and you can go like this. And as you're doing it, one sound magically transforms into the other, and every note is totally independent. So that's actually getting ready to hit the App Store as soon as we hit the go button.
Nice. Well,
and the visuals are really cool. We have a code name for our visual display, which is blobby, because it has these really interesting colors that happen, and it looks when you see it, you'll know why we called it that. But it totally reacts to the what's going on with the sound and where you are on the playing surface.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, for only 10 percentage points, you can have my voice in the app if you so desire. But
there you go.
Yeah,
you're a tough business man. I like
exactly.
that.
So I'm obviously conscious of your time. I know you're busy with a million things mid tour. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That small thing. Yeah. So I was going to ask one quick little question to finish up, and then if I could get your question for the next guest and an artist pick.
Okay.
We talked about AI a little bit and technology on the whole. Can you see sort of AI specifically influencing, say, the next Dream Theater, the next collection of songs you write with Dream Theater?
I see AI. Well, AI influences me a lot. So in that sense, it could definitely influence what happens with Dream Theater. It also influences the kind of instruments that I use. Because, AI is basically, it's in so many areas. So for all I know, before I get into the studio with Dream Theater, there could be an instrument that has some AI component in it that allows me to, do some other kind of, let's say, morphing of the sound, that we've never even thought of before. It's a possibility. That's the reason that I like the AI stuff. It's just because it opens up all these creative possibilities. Think about what you can do, like text to image stuff that that people are doing, incredible, or text to video, or these amazing things even that I'm posting like daily now that I'm playing the new Video League functionality. But that's also coming into music, so it's opening my brain. And I know everybody has different feelings about it. Some people are just frightened by it. Some people want to shut it down because they think it's the end of the world. But I'm looking at it, maybe I'm looking at it blindly or through a narrower focus, and as a musician, as a creative person, and I'm really you can't deny that it's like amazing the kind of visual things you could see and the kind of audio things you could hear and like things you've never heard or seen before. So how could I ignore that? I want to play a part of that. That's my goal, is to how can we maximize our creative human potential and use these tools to kind of make ourselves feel even like more enlightened and create cooler things. And so that's my, that's the positive side of AI and the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah. Let's end on the positive side, just because I'm in the middle. I'm unsure as to how I feel about where it could go. I can see both sides of the the sort of artificial intelligence coin, I think. Yeah. So cool. If we could get a question for the next guest, so you can set the conversation up in any direction you'd like.
Well, do I know who even asked the question that you asked me? Is that for me? Like
so
somebody?
Your question was from Perry in Pendulum, guitar player in Pendulum.
Interesting. Okay.
And then I won't tell you who yours is for, so that we can keep it a bit more open-ended. I always keep the next one a secret, so that you have to.
You won't. Wait, I'm sorry. You don't want me to tell you who it's for, or?
Oh no. So
what?
You won't know who the question is for, so it's got to be quite an open-ended question.
I won't know who the question is for. Oh, it's for. I can't tell you. I want it.
Yeah, it's for the next guest.
It's for a specific person.
Yeah, so you need to. I need a question a bit like the one I asked you. He didn't know who he was asking the question to.
Got it. Okay.
So something you think would provide an interesting conversation starter.
Well, I think kind of was one of the things we were talking about. Like, you think you're making music more for yourself, or you're making music more for others?
Nice. It's a very introspective kind of idea. Yeah. Cool. And then also if we can get
thinking.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And lastly, if we get an artist pick, I know you already mentioned the name eludes me, the guitarist you mentioned earlier.
Matteo Mancuso, wonderful new talented guitar player.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything you want to plug to finish up?
Well, I guess we'll just plug in my own world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Yeah, definitely. Speaking of like AI kinds of things, it's not exactly AI, but everybody thinks it is when they see it. I'm working with a wonderful developer in the UK. His name is Jonathan Bell, and I will definitely plug what we're doing together because I think it's groundbreaking and certainly very cool and about to explode into the next level of cool. And you can get it right now in its existing form on the iOS platform, soon to be Android as well. And it's called Riffler, like Riffler. So definitely people can check that out because it's a riff creation tool. This will blow your mind when you check it out. And like I said, it's about to be more than that as well. And one other thing I'll plug is, well, I don't know when you're putting this podcast out.
Yeah, probably a couple of weeks.
In a couple of weeks, okay. Well, if it's not before like July 25th or something like that, we should definitely plug the fact that I'm here on the Dream Sonic tour with Dream Theater. We're touring with Animals as leaders and Devin Townsend. We're going to be out for another, whatever it is, 4 weeks or so around the U.S. and some shows in Canada too. So awesome. That's a good thing to talk about.
Well, thank you very much, man. Thanks for your time.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe. It's cool hanging out with you and chatting.